I am First Alert Meteorologist Courteney Jacobazzi. Thank you so much for joining us here on Atlanta News First Alert Weather Plus here. Of course, we had a huge day, a historic event happening earlier this morning. We had the all-female flight crew, including CBS's very own Gail King, go up in the Blue Origin rocket, and they were able to experience that really cool phenomenon that happens when you go up in space of weightlessness. And no, it is not because there's no gravity in space. There actually is gravity in space. That the whole source of gravity, the sensation of gravity, is what keeps all of our planets in orbit, right? So if we didn't have any kind of gravity being pulled, then the planets would just freely float around in space as they please. And that's just not how it works. So I'm going to kind of explain the kind of science, or the physics rather, behind it. So instead of playing meteorologist today, I'm going to play a little more physicist. And you're going to have to pay really close attention. Class is in session, okay? Because unless you were fabulous at physics, it can sometimes get a little bit confusing. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm good enough at physics that I could be a physics professor, because that would be an absolute lie. I'm a meteorologist through and through. But we're still going to talk about kind of the basics to that feeling of weightlessness. Because again, it's not because there's no gravity in space. It's because of a few kind of forces of motion and some what we call apparent forces that just because of gravity and a bunch of other things that act on our bodies here on Earth and in space, how it all makes it possible. I know that's a little confusing, but stick with me. We're going to make it through it. So I was literally telling our wonderful streaming director, Maria, I'm like, I hope people can follow this today, because it is going to be a little tricky. Let's do it. So what you're looking at right now is Earth, naturally, right? And so the arrows around Earth are representing a rocket. Okay, so when the rocket goes up in space, a rocket, not necessarily, I couldn't tell you the exact path of the Blue Origin rocket today, but when you have rockets blast off into space to do their exploration, they are constantly moving. And in this instance, they made it up into kind of that just outer layer of Earth where they felt that sensation of weightlessness and then came back down. But regardless, that spacecraft was always in motion. And so while their bodies were getting pulled on by gravity, because, for instance, Earth and the moon, they have their own gravitational pull, right? And the moon naturally orbits around Earth. And without that gravitational pull, like I mentioned, our moon could just float off into space wherever it wanted. So as all the women went up in that Blue Origin rocket today, gravity was still pulling on them. Now, that source of gravity did lessen a little bit when they went out into Earth's kind of outer core there. But in order for them to get that weightless feeling, they were constantly in motion going what I would assume was west. So the rocket was constantly moving around Earth while they were free falling. So because of a very important law of motion that you probably learned at some point in high school, if not college, this is the reason that they were suspended in the air for those few minutes. So essentially, because gravity is still active on their bodies, they are still being pulled down to Earth. They're simply in that constant state of free fall. So if you ever went skydiving or you've seen a video of skydiving, you know that their body is in a constant state of free fall because of Earth's gravity until a parachute goes off, and then that essentially interrupts that downward force. So that's kind of where Newton's law of motion comes into play. So the first law of motion is the one that you've probably heard a bunch of times. Oh, it went backwards. That an object in motion will continue to go in that direction until another force acts upon it, right? So I don't know why that went away, but that's okay. We'll talk about the next one in a second. But essentially what's happening is you have this rocket going into space, and while Earth's gravity is trying to pull them down, their bodies are moving at the rate of speed of that rocket to prevent them from falling. So essentially, an opposite force is acting on the force of gravity, keeping them suspended in the air. So think about when you're driving your car, right? When you are driving in your car and you're going 70 miles per hour down the interstate, you are going 70 miles per hour with your car, okay? So when the rocket goes up into space, the rocket is moving in Earth's orbit at a very rapid pace. What that is doing is keeping them suspended in the air because they are moving with the rocket. They are fighting against Earth's gravitational pull, and that is keeping them going in an opposite direction of down. So there's all these forces fighting their bodies, wanting to get pulled back to Earth because of how quickly that rocket is moving. That is why rocket science is so difficult, because they have to figure out what is that speed that they need to go in order for that free fall to work, right? Because there is still a gravitational pull up in space, especially when you're close to Earth. So there's another force that's really interesting. You might have never heard it before. It's called centrifugal force. And the way I like to describe this is also in a car. So we're kind of thinking of cars as spaceships in this kind of analogy here. But when you turn in your car, what happens? You usually lean a little bit, which is why one of the many reasons why seatbelts are important, right? So when you turn in your car, say you're turning to the left, your body's going to go right. That is centrifugal force acting on your body. So essentially, what this does in terms of space, when it comes to that free-falling motion, is it allows them to still have like a center point. So it just helps give them a little more, I guess, traction to be able to move so they're not just like flailing all over the place. So this apparent force, when the rocket is moving with Earth's orbit, keeping them suspended in the air, this kind of helps them from, I guess, flying all over the place. That's the best way to put it. But it still helps give them that free fall motion because they are still, there's still a bunch of different forces acting upon them that don't allow them to just fall straight to the bottom of the rocket because Earth's gravity isn't going to, that gravitational pull isn't just going to take over. So you need a really high rate of speed because you're going to be moving with that rocket. Your body is physically moving at that speed. You're not feeling it because there's not a lot of gravity up there. Instead, you are free falling the whole time, but being in a rocket moving so fast, Newton's first law of motion, that keeps you suspended in the air and prevents you from essentially just hitting the bottom, being pulled in by Earth's gravitational force. Then you have centrifugal force, which essentially is an outward force on a spinning object. So that way, as everything is rotating, that is kind of keeping them a little more suspended, a little more grounded. I know that's confusing, and if I had an hour to try to teach you chemistry with, or physics, it would make a lot more sense. But that's kind of the basics of why they felt weightless. Again, there is gravity in space. It is less than here on Earth. That's why you weigh about only 5% of your body weight in space, which obviously helps. But that isn't the reason that you float when you go up into space. It is simply the motion that you are physically moving as fast as that rocket, and that is helping keep your body suspended in the air while Earth is trying to pull you down at the same time. But again, that force of gravity, not quite as stout, so it's not going to pull you in a huge way. And your body's also lighter, so that also helps in some way because of that lesser gravity pull. So was that confusing? Maybe. I don't know. But hopefully you learned something new today. And really, I mean, just super cool. Space is just incredible. There's a lot more exploration to come. I was talking with some of my friends, and they're like, one day we're going to all be able to go on vacation into space and all feel that weightlessness. But just know that it's not because there's no gravity and your body's just floating. It is because you are quite literally moving as fast as that rocket is, and that is helping keep you suspended in the air while Earth is trying to pull you back down here. So that is hopefully the easiest way to explain that. Newton's first law of motion, if you want to look it up and do your research on it, that is the main factor. So, all right, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day, and make sure, of course, to join us at noon on Atlanta News First to get your full forecast if you want that as well. I appreciate you spending some time with me, and we'll catch you here next time.